Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. Today, we are talking to Vladimir. Last time we discussed about Doxa's code in detail, and this time we will be talking about what are the skills that, as a technical writer, you should focus on, integrate AI in your workflows, and lastly, we'll talk a little bit about collaboration. So, welcome, Vladimir, to the podcast once again.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you here too again.
So I want to know, like, what are the core skills which are like often overlooked by technical writers, but those are the foundations, like especially in this changing times.
Yes, we live in such an interesting time. You see, lots of AI tooling, lots of people thinking that documentation can be generated with just a simple prompt. Fortunately, that's not the case quite often, and it puts additional pressure on technical writers in general to kind of defend their skills, defend their position in the market. But fortunately, again, if we revert back to basics, revert basic to the foundation of the profession, you will find what you're looking for. What I mean is, technical writing is inherently a communication exercise. Basically, we're trying to communicate idea. Since it's a technical writing, the idea might be quite technical, you see. So basic communication skills are a must, but you also need to be able to go there and research on your own some technical matters, talk to subject matter experts to gain this knowledge, and most of all, be able to process the information provided by them into more clear form and translate it. Basically, sometimes you remind yourself as a translator, translate it to your target audience, whoever that might be. There might be some other developers, so the translation is not that hard to do, but it might be also a very different group of people with different set of skills rather than your subject matter experts, and the translation might be quite hard, a lot of context involved. So the common part for all technical writers, I think, are communication skills, including natural communication, just verbal with subject matter expert. But of course, written communication is a core part of it. Additionally to that, you have to understand information architecture to be able to structure the information in such a way informed that people won't be struggling finding it, like finding the exact piece of information and guidance they need. And additionally to that, I feel like instructional design is the thing that you need to learn, basically how to write a good instruction that people might follow and won't get lost in a way. So these are the core skills. Additionally to that, well, technical writing is such a interesting profession. You can do a lot of different side quests, if I may, that involve a lot of different skills. If you want, you can find yourself a very technical role where you could engage with engineers a lot and do a little bit of testing, a little bit of that, a little bit of different stuff. Or you can go into linguistics more and talk about engaging texts or precise and very accurate instructions. So it's very different. Choose your poison.
In a team, if you have different kinds of people who are specialized, what are those specializations? Like you mentioned few of them, like for example technical, few people are experts in linguistics. So if you are like, maybe if somebody's making a team from scratch, how should they think about those specialization and team structure?
Yes, the specialization in technical writing is definitely a thing. I see a lot of roles on the market with very different requirements, but also people with a lot of different experiences, and all of them are called technical writers. And you have to be way more specific to understand how to compare them. And for that reason, I also had this talk posted not so long time ago about the technical writer's skill tree. This is an attempt to actually find and classify the different possibilities to improve yourself, to grow as a technical writer. What can you become and what you are at the moment, this kind of things. And in this talk, I talk about multiple different specializations, like the linguistics part of things. For example, you can go into your like language oriented skills, whatever language, whichever language you use. Might be English, might be something different. You can learn it as a professional tool to advanced level. You can use it again in many different ways and forms, and with a great proficiency to achieve your goals of communication in such a great way. That's specialization for sure, and I've seen people working like that. Me myself, not so much. I'm not such a great person when it comes down to linguistics. I only know two languages to some degree, and my favorite specialization, I would say, is technical expertise, specifically software. I do like software development life cycle and talking to software engineers and learning new technologies there. That's what makes me happy. So I actually spend a lot of time experimenting and learning a lot in this area. But this is one of the other ways to do it. But again, this technical expertise branch of the skill tree is actually not limited to software engineering. There might be so many different areas you can grow, right? Hardware engineering, biomedicine, anything related to engineering or something sophisticated can be studied, can be learned, the basic principles and knowledges. Even just being proficient at academic research might be considered a field of expertise. And there are some other, again, branches of the skill tree you can learn. For example, documentation tooling. This is a huge branch that involves all kind of different tools. There is Doxers Code, my favorite one, but there are also some very interesting programs there. Well, everyone knows the Microsoft Office suite and some analogs like LibreOffice and stuff like that. But there is also Dita. There are some other tooling, quite professional tools that you can use. And the professional usage of these tools might, again, involve you being more efficient and ship your products in a better way and faster. So you see, so it's quite important. And the trick for the whole skill tree experience is not like selecting one specialization and be like super cool in this and only this specialization. I think the trick is to be at least a little bit proficient in all the branches that you consider important to your own career. Basically selecting, like, I need this, and this, selecting for yourself which are the branches of the skill tree that you want to pursue and to which level, to which proficiency, basically, you want them to visualize what you can become or what you want to become as a technical writer. And that's a sophisticated task, because if you consider all the branches, all the possibilities you have, it's huge. Like I said, it's such an interesting area. It has so many adjacent roles, so many skills to learn. So it's really hard just to write them down, even the full skill tree. That's why in my talks about the skill tree, I talk about specialization separately. Like if we specialize only in one direction at a time, we can see probably maybe not all alternatives, but all the relevant alternatives to us. So basically, if I know two languages, the linguistics branch for me will be limited to only these two languages and not much else. That makes it much more manageable, especially when you're thinking about your own experiences and skills.
And like you mentioned, there are like various aspects of the skill tree also, and you have to like self-assess where you stand on which branch. If you can give us like a just an overview of what are the 4 or 5 main areas of this skill tree. Like you mentioned two of them specifically. The first was the tooling. Second one was the skill, which is like linguistic programming. So is there anything else also, and is AI part of it?
Yes, there are many areas. I mean, I don't think there is an extensive, like exhaustive list of all the branches you can come up with. There is some model that I have. There are some other models, and in this model you can find something like linguistics, technical expertise, but also like writing marketing-oriented text, so basically marketing as a direction of improvement. That's possible even for technical writers, believe me. What else is there? Like documentation, tooling proficiency, I've mentioned. There is also a branch dedicated to leadership, when you actually lead a team into documentation battles. Additionally to that, yes, AI itself, I mean, for many people, it is mostly described as a tool. I don't think it's like does it a very well job to describe it just as a tool, but it is definitely a tool too. So you can consider your proficiency at using AI tooling as one of the branches. And as to answer to your question, how it actually engages with the skill tree, well, it is a dedicated branch when you talk about using the tools efficiently, like the chatbots, the agentic AI, and everything else. But interesting effect that it has, that it can influence all other branches. So if you have, for example, a deficit in one of the branches, for example, you're quite not proficient at the language you're working with at the moment. Maybe it's not your mother tongue, right? So it's not your native language, and you're just not able to use it to the same degree of proficiency as some of the native speakers. So you can find yourself quite struggling to put your word to the exact level of detail you want, the exact level of accuracy. And AI can help you with that. AI is notoriously well like suited for actually rephrasing, for huge vocabulary, for uh, being a good tool to overall, synonyms provision, and also some rewrites, some styling issue fixes. The problem I'm seeing that you should be able to control it. If you are not able to see the difference in the results produced, and you just selecting randomly, it's AI who writes. It's not you. So to be able to work efficiently with AI, you have to be able to understand the difference in quality, even if it will take you like much longer time to write a text to such level of vocabulary and stylistic, precision, than AI could do it like in a minute or so. You still have to have these skills. You have to train yourself to be able to do so. Otherwise, you won't be able to tell whether AI did a good job or not. You won't tell the difference. And that's a terrible problem that many people encounter nowadays, especially people who consider, oh, I can just ask AI to write my docs. I mean, technically you can, and the result will be there. But is that result good? I mean, will you able to tell? That's what I think about the role of technical writers right now. It's such a tectonic shift in the industry at the moment because of AI, and people struggling to use it efficiently, struggling to get good results of it because they lose control. They basically let AI to do the work without properly supervising its work, and that leads to a lot of problems down the line. The problems, I mean, it's a huge list, really. It could include some technical debt, literally from you misunderstanding or not understanding the topics that the AI describes and the technologies behind it. But also it can include, of course, usual stuff like hallucinations, very convincing lies, and false quotations, false precision, lots of things. So best case scenario is if you control the AI, if you actually able to produce the same work yourself to understand what good looks like, what is good. If you understand what is good and you ask AI with a specific, requirements, and your expectations, you can actually verify its work. You can actually tell whether it's good. If you don't have an idea what you'll get, you don't have an idea how good looks like, what can you expect? I mean, you'll get something, and something might be good, might be not. The chances are there. That's unfortunately. So AI is such a huge shift. It's still quite hard to predict all the consequences of it, but the genie is out of the bottle. We will see where it leads in like a couple years, I guess.
You mentioned a little bit about supervising AI. I want to know, in terms of workflow, when you are working on a project, do you have like certain guidelines that you use? There is a skills, Claude skills that have come up. Do you maintain that, or do you resort to like prompting in between? So, what is your workflow? Is there any preparation somebody has to do? So that any recommendation on that side?
The whole area of learning AI at the moment is quite on a hype. So there are so many materials about how to learn how to use these tools, and I also use them. We're being encouraged in my company to experiment with them, and I'm very grateful for my company to providing us with these opportunities. So instead of just ignoring the problem, we're trying to experiment and find our way through. And I would say that yes, it's a very useful tool which can be used to multiply your work. Basically, the multiplication effect, it really scales up what you can do with the same amount of time and effort, but it puts you at a very stressful position, because instead of technical writing per se, when you write the documentation, but of course also doing all the research for it and working with the text, you find yourself more and more in a technical reading position, basically reviewing the AI work, sometimes editing its work, of course, that's an inevitable part of it, but also the whole research part is diminishing quite often because, again, you can make a prompt that will gather you some information, and the whole writing part is also quite struggling because people just ignoring the possibility of going there and writing the text manually when they can draft with AI, then rewrite with AI, and then it's just it appears to be that some people just ignore the keyboard other than typing their prompts now, and that's terrible. You lose your craft like that. You lose your skills. Basically, it makes you at a huge disadvantage learning wise. You lose yourself, your profession. I don't know I don't know how to reinforce the message here that it's terrible. You should not do that. So the dangers are there. The dangers are not for the immediate result. I mean, they're still there, but are not only for the immediate result you get with AI, which is still like hallucinations. Very hard to tell from this synthetic polished language that it talks complete utterly nonsense. You see, it can be the case, but also your own process, your own craft gets influenced by AI. It's a very simple tool that's very, very powerful, can do a lot of things, but it changes you. If you skip through a few steps of writing the text on your own, you don't get the experience. If you are not experienced technical writing at the time, it will make it harder for you to learn these skills. And if you are an experienced technical writer, you can use AI quite efficiently. I just worried a little bit about whether you'll be losing the skills over the time because you over relying on the AI. You see? So for the AI usage, there must be some constraints to make it safe, to make it responsible. I would call them guardrails, I guess, because they literally are there to limit a little bit the freedom, but for the safety concerns. Basically, what I do myself is I use Agentic AI on my own documentation. I use it locally, so it's not a local model. It's actually, I think, a Copilot subscription from our company, but it works only with the local data. And if it needs to go on the internet for something, it will ask for permission to do so. So there is a lot of sandbox in there, a lot of permissions, but the agentic AI is very, very powerful, and it can help me not only write documentation, but also write some automation for my documentation and write a lot of code, front-end development, even back-end development. For technical writers, that can also be quite an enabler. You see the multiplier. So if you know a little bit about the topic and you know what you actually need, you can create some kind of prototype with AI. And that's great. Basically, what I'm telling you, if you have this simple task of rewriting some text, I mean, yeah, sure, the AI can do that very efficiently, but it's not the whole purpose of it. It's so much more powerful than that. If you ask it to write a whole page for some new feature, some new product, or whole set of documentation, even it will do so. But will you be able to control the quality of the result? It will be much harder than you would do it manually, or you would do it semi-automatically with going like page by page or topic by topic with the AI and trying to plan the architecture of this documentation first. So reasonable safety guardrails are needed. Otherwise, you will be undermining your own development, but also undermining the quality of the results. If you don't have the skills in the area working manually yet, I would say the only possible guardrail I see is just limit the amount of work that is done by AI. I've heard people saying like, don't do more than like 30% of work with AI. The rest should be you writing it and manually, just researching the topic, writing the first draft, rewriting it. And that's a great way to get the skill. Yes, it's slower, but it makes you better, makes you as a professional more experienced. That gains you experience. If you ask AI to do that and then read what it did, I mean, you don't get as much experience. That's the problem.
You briefly mentioned that the AI that you have access to also works on the technical part or some integrations. So just want to know, like currently at Canonical, so what is your tool stack? How what are the like tool stack means like how is the workflow in terms of technicalities?
I can talk only about my experience there. In my
Hmm.
experience, I quite enjoy working with Copilot. Basically, I use VS Code as my main integrated developer environment, and I find it very nice time to use Copilot plugin there to use both agentic mode, and if I need to restrain it to just simple planning mode or asking mode, and the whole set of sandboxing and safety measures I find there is also quite enough for me to feel better about using AI. Let's call it like that, because again, it won't go over internet finding some data without me specifically approving for that. It won't go publishing anything without me specifically approving that. And I actively trying to do as little as possible of that, of actually publishing by AI. So all the work I'm trying to do with AI, I always do it locally on my machine. Then I review it locally, and I cannot stress this enough how I enjoy using version control systems like Git to do that. Basically, it's additional safety net for me to see exactly what changed and nothing passed through that. So I quite enjoy basically doing some work with AI, then reviewing this work, of course, using the version control system. And only after that, I push it basically in my own branch, create pull request and stuff like that. So the proper review is a must. And this review, I mean, it can be quite a demanding thing, because you have to read through a lot of content sometimes. Sometimes you have to understand things you didn't understand previously, because AI had to expand the scope past what you expected. And in this case, I also find that AI itself can be a tool. You can ask AI for clarification, for explanation of some concept that it did use in its code or in its writing on in the tool about what you're writing. So I find it useful even for that. On the step of verification, I can use it as a not a wiki, but a full-blown tutor. Although you still have to understand you cannot trust it to a full degree. It's not like a trusted source of information. So you should verify the sources too. So usually you try to understand where it's coming from, and it provides you a very good way to do so with some links to the source material that you can do. You verify the factual information. You even run the commands it's suggesting, just to make sure they are not hallucinated. They will work. They will achieve what you expecting them to achieve. So there are a lot of measures that I take, but most of them are about not publishing the thing that AI wrote, but going through it manually. It's not just a review how you would do with a real person, because real person has a creative intent. It has conscious, right? It won't well, usually won't compulsively lie to you just because. AI will. So you should expect this as a big problem. You should expect it to be not so much truthful to you, and that elevates the necessity for reviews and elevates the degree of attention you need to put into these reviews, especially since AI kind of puts this shiny polish on everything it does, right? The wording seems, well, not impeccable, of course, but better than you would expect from some engineer or subject matter expert doing the same, right? So it looks good. It looks just what you have asked, but it can be not factually correct or completely internally contradicting. And yeah, it's hard to spot these problems, and practice will help. The more you practice yourself this tooling, the better you are at both using the tools, of course, but also reviewing the results and spotting what gone wrong and how to fix it. So I would stress that people need to try these tools, uh, find the working solution, the models that works best in which particular scenarios and applications, the tools they enjoy working most. These combinations, these success combinations, they can be a little bit different for everyone, depending on your available resources, your available, again, your circumstances. Basically, even the documentation you're doing, it all can be very different.
Yeah, you I want to dive deeper into a bit into this collaboration part of it. Like if there are typical like few team members in the documentation teams. So how do you like generally one should do the review process? What should the review process look like? And generally for every organization there's like a checklist or maybe like a sign off process framework. So what should be that? Obviously in case of AI you already mentioned, but for like how do you generally work with your team members, and who should review though? What should be the review process overall?
In my work right now, these topics are not exclusive to each other. So the review I'm doing on the AI produced content is one thing, but then I kind of push these results as a part of a pull request that gets additional reviews as per company's policies. So if I would not use AI tools, it would still be the same reviews for the pull request at the end. You see, so these two different types of reviews, they're happening not instead of each other, but one by one, basically one after another. As for the second part like of collaborative review, when you actually collaborating, it all depends on your available resources in the company and the process you're after. How critical is that you won't miss an error, or what's the cost of an error? What's the cost of mistake here? That's a great question. In a smaller company, when you have less number of people, I've seen policies like to merge a pull request with documentation, it just needs to be reviewed. That basically means that there is one author and there is one other person that reviewed it, and that's it. And I mean, if the author is the TA or like technical author or technical writer even, then the other person might be like non-technical writer person, you see, because it's, again, in a smaller company, there might be only one technical writer working. In bigger companies, it's usually you have more resources, but again, there are some time constraints. There are some interesting rules about how much time you should spend on reviews and how to speed the process up. Basically, some deadlines you need to meet if you have a request for a review. But it all comes down to being reasonable. What's reasonable, again, depends on your risks and your processes. What I've seen as a reasonable process in a bigger company with some high stakes is basically doing, for any piece of content written by a technical writer, do at least one peer review, so by another technical writer, and one technical review, so by some engineer. I find it a reasonable approach because, again, you reviewing your own content usually less efficient because, again, you wrote this, you know all there is about this text, or at least you should. So it kind of gets optimized in your own head, whether you want it or not. You glance over some of the mistakes that might have been made there just out of how brain works, and it's much easier to review someone else's work. So peer reviews are a great thing, but they're a great thing not only for that. Actually, peer reviews are great for actually sharing experience and making sure that you're aligned on your understanding of a style guide in the company and other rules. You see, just basically two technical writers peer reviewing each other can share a lot of their understanding of how rules apply to the text and what should be done differently. Maybe they even can find some edge cases that are not covered by the style guide and improve the style guide. So you see, there are lots of things. But security-wise, yeah, it's pretty simple. Engineers usually prefer to have at least two other people looking at your code for, just generic safety reasons. For it's called secure software development lifecycle, I believe. For documentation content, it depends how much risk you put there. Reasonable approach might be one peer review and one technical review. That's what I would go, but it's such a generic advice. It has to be adjusted for your situation, of course.
So you mentioned that you use Git and version control. So in that case, how do you convey those part? Do you like the comments, specific comments?
Well, that's easy. We use, again, there are multiple platforms. The moment we use GitHub as a platform, hosting for code, it's one of the most popular platforms, I think, for that.
Does it have like a comment section also, like for that, or?
We have pull requests there.
Hmm.
And pull request is specifically what you are suggesting, like what changes you are suggesting. And
Yeah.
for each line of changes, you can put a dedicated comment there. So the
Oh,
review process looks like that. You select, like you just see the the difference. Basically, what's the suggested change here? And you see something wrong. So you click on the line and you put comment specifically to the line. You can select even multiple lines if it's a bigger fragment. You can even sometimes provide a generic comment about the whole file, like I don't know, there might be some issue with the file, some classification. You see, so the whole experience, I mean, the platform and the version control system, it was created for code, but I mean, all the source code is still text files. So we use it for documentation, especially in Doxys code. It's very, very convenient tool. And we use it very actively, especially when we talking to engineers and, just doing some tech reviews. There is a problem, though, when you trying to have a review from a non-technical person, for example, some manager. And this manager might not even know how to use Git because, I mean, they're manager, they're not supposed to go in the source code, and you're like, yeah, that's a problem. So there are some workarounds. There are some platforms that provide you with graphical user interface tools outside of GitHub. My favorite is still GitHub. It's such a professional tool, but I recognize that there is a problem that not all people in the company might know how to use Git and GitHub.
yeah. One more thing on this review cycle itself, I wanted to explore is like a lot of times, commonly people share that the docs are outdated, but the docs will become outdated on when there's a release, and the documentation is not synced with that release. So how do one prevent that, or what are the ways to at least know whether the current documentation is different from whatever you have written? Because both the software is going through the CI/CD development cycle, and same is for the doc. So should both documentation and product be synced, or is there a sync up happening in between?
It depends. There are many different approaches to say solving
Hmm.
this problem. I believe there is a one best approach that is basically being used actively and very popular in Doxos code. That's where you have this pull request for changing the source code of your product inside the repository, and in the same pull request you also change the documentation content. That's only possible when you store the content of your documentation inside the same repository as your source codes for the product. But it's very, very nice tool. So basically, let's imagine your software engineers adding a new feature to the product, right? That means they would need to change some source code. So they have these pull requests changing this source code. And inside the same source code, you have also changes to the documentation. And in such a way, basically, as soon as this pull request merged atomically, you have both at the same time. So there is no transition period when something is outdated. You see, it happens atomically at the same time, and it's great, to be honest, because again, the scope of the pull request is the exact changes you need. And if you do the documentation update there, I mean, it's all kind of nicely put it together. It's not always possible because sometimes documentation lives outside of this repository in some other, and then there might be some issue. And basically, there are two approaches. You, like in this case, you either release your new version of the product with the new documentation, and that means that release of documentation will be blocking. So you first do your code changes, but you don't release the product. You kind of wait some time enough for people to create documentation about it, merge it, and only then you release the product. Well, understandably, no managers want to wait. We already have this feature figured out. It's already working. We want to ship it to our clients because they kind of want to use it already, and they're paying us big money for that. So there is a different approach when there's a documentation that's lagging behind. So there is a very new feature. It was just basically just implemented and tested, hopefully. And then it was released, and our users already can use it, but we're still writing the docs for it. Yeah, I know it sounds terrible, and sometimes it is terrible, but for some features that don't require a lot of guidance to use, I mean, it can be a thing. It can be an effective thing especially from marketing perspective, when this time to market parameter is a critical one. Again, the problem of lagging behind with documentation, there is no silver bullet. There are so many ways you can try addressing the issue. For example, you can test your documentation. You can literally run script that will run all the commands from your tutorial and make sure that at least the commands are correct. At least your product in its current version can be used like you prescribe it to be used in the tutorial. That's one thing to do it, but it's not a guarantee that there is nothing else that got outdated, you see? So no silver bullet, but there are some ways to try tackle it.
Naturally, the question comes is about the quality of the documentation. Like, what qualifies as a good documentation? What are the things, if somebody has written a draft, if there's a version of documentation out there, how do you assess whether that's complete, whether it's serving?
Documentation quality is such a vast topic, and I'm afraid, again, there is no single scale that people can just compare which documentation has better quality. Sometimes it's even very subjective. Some people like one documentation said more than the other, regardless of a product. And again, sometimes it's hard to understand the reasoning behind that. Maybe it's just personal preferences. But again, there are some common ideas, I would say, principles that makes a great understanding, at least for me, that they form the understanding what should be aimed for, what should be the goal. And that's actually partially the answer here, because for me, the first two questions that I ask about any particular documentation work, if we need to create, for example, some kind of a guide, any page of documentation, I'm just trying to think about as a technical communication. So basically, what's the goal of this communication, and who is our target audience? Basically, what are we trying to say here, and to whom? And that's like, these two questions are crucial. You have to understand them to be able to start working, and otherwise you will be just doing some random stuff without fully realizing what to achieve here. And what will happen if you don't have answers to these questions? Well, you still can probably produce something. You just would have no idea if that's exactly the thing you wanted to produce. You see, if you don't know the goal, you don't know what you need to achieve here. You just writing on some topic like an article or something. That's the difference. In documentation, you have the intent. And I find that it's very, very interesting how there is a particular framework that actually helps you a lot with optimizing your documentation for this intent, to understand how to create documentation that serves the user needs best, and basically optimize every single page of your documentation to serve your user needs. The framework I'm talking about, called diataxis, and it prescribes 4 different categories of documentation. Specifically, it's a tutorial, how-to guides, references, and explanations. And if you think about it, you can probably classify every single page of your documentation into one of the 4 categories. And if there is a page which you're really struggling with, maybe you can separate it into multiple pages, just separating the issues here. And again, this is kind of a simple strategy, really, but if you read about it, if you try applying it, you will see how it's actually pretty smart, and it gives you a lot of opportunities to improve your documentation, to make it more streamlined. Like I said, optimize it. So it's an optimization goal. The more specialized your particular page to be a one type of documentation rather than everything, the more you can serve the needs of a user. Basically, if they need specific practical guide how to achieve some practical goal, they don't need much hand holding, they don't need much explanation, they need to do one particular action, they need just a guide for that action. Well, it's a how-to guide. That's what they want. Why would you dilute this experience, that what they want, with anything like explanation that they don't need, or some reference data that they don't need? That's the whole idea, and I find it super useful. Totally recommend. But there are some other ways you can also improve your documentation quality. Again, like I said, no single scale. At least I don't know anything like that. But common consensus, I guess, that the documentation should serve users, right? So there is target audience, which I, in this case, called users, and you should probably help them somehow. They have some kind of an idea what they need to do. They have some kind of a need. You have to help them to achieve the goal, to serve that need. Well, that's called user centric. Basically, you think about who is the user, who is the user persona, and you try to get what they need, what they want, and you try to help them. That's what I like about this profession, helping people without even meeting them. Basically, that's a great idea when you try to optimize your documentation, not for how it looks, not for how it smells or whatever, specifically whether it's helpful. And helpful to do what is a great question, which gets us back to the two questions at the beginning. What's the goal here? Are we trying to make them install your product? Are we trying to make something with it? Are we trying to inspire them to explore and build a prototype with it? You see, the goal of communication is a tricky part here. You have to understand it. You have to guide the user through the user journey with your product, maybe through multiple pages of your documentation, to lead them to success, basically step by step, guiding them with what they need, guiding them through steps of success so they feel like they're succeeding with your product. They're not feeling that they're failing. They're not feeling confused. So this whole experience of them using your product with your documentation and succeeding, that's a user experience that you need to design. That's design thinking and user experience. And the whole thing about documentation being, part of it is like basically user-centric approach to your documentation. Again, there are many other ways you can improve your documentation and help your users, but it all comes down to this: information architecture, which can be addressed mostly with the axis, and user-centric approach, where you literally think about what user wants, what's the goal that you want the user to do, and who is your user. Basically, who is our targeted audience.
If you are writing a certain documenting with certain intent, like, okay, this is supposed to be an how to guide, this is supposed to be a tutorial, do you start blank, or do you generally have like a structure already in place that you use again and again?
It depends. If I already have some documentation for this product, I probably have a lot of different guides already, right? So I can reuse some of them to start, but usually, again, at the moment that I need to create a new guide, I kind of have an idea what's the topic, about the topic, basically, the new feature or the new action that we will be guiding our users through. So I have some idea of what we need to be doing, and I start with that. I put the notes that I have from like interviewing subject matter experts or just out of pull requests and Jira tickets. I put my notes somewhere together. I really quickly draft a layout of the how-to guide, which actually pretty repetitive if you think about it. For the same product, you probably already had a few guides. If it's not something like a very extreme way of using your product, it should be close, not similar, but close. Let's call it like that. So yeah, usually I don't have problems with specifically that issue, like starting a how-to guide. Finish it may be quite tricky because you have content now, you need to review it thoroughly, and you need to understand most of all whether you achieve the practical goal. Basically, you need to remind yourself what was the goal of this guide and whether you have achieved it. If you did, and if users didn't get lost in the way to that goal, then you succeeded.
Is there anything else or a piece of advice that you would want to give an upcoming technical writer in these times, if they want to get into technical writing and really do a good work? What are the things they should focus on first, or like they should take care so that they are sorted for the long term?
Well, it's definitely tough times to start in this career, or to be honest, in many careers in regards to computer science and information technologies, programming, like you name it. So good luck, first of all. Second of all, I would definitely encourage you to find a thing that you really enjoy. Because when you enjoy doing something, you can spend much more time with that particular topic without getting bored, without getting tired. You can spend more time. You can basically play a long run game. And if you spend enough time and dedication on any topic, you would become a great professional at that. That's inevitable. Like, you'll gain experience, and people tend to hire great professionals. You'll get a higher salary, you'll get more opportunities just because you have such skills. So try to find something you really enjoy.
That's a great advice, especially if you are enjoying what you're doing. That's it's like it's very efficient, and it ensures that you're doing good work. So thanks, Vladimir, for your time. It was really fruitful discussion covering various topics of related to technical writing, from writing AI to release cycles review, and closing with a really good advice. So thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.